The silence was absolute, then catastrophic. Emergency lighting cascaded through the paradigm's corridors in waves of deep crimson and electric blue, casting fractured shadows that seemed to exist in multiple planes simultaneously. Captain Elena Rodriguez tasted copper, blood from a burst capillary, a physiological response to dimensional stress that medical texts had only theorized about. Temporal markers are nonsensical, Lieutenant Aisha Nyong'o muttered, her fingers dancing across a holographic interface that continuously recalibrated and collapsed. Quantum equations scrolled like living things, mathematical representations twisting and reforming faster than human perception could track. The ship's primary systems were a symphony of controlled chaos, each subsystem fighting to maintain cohesion in a reality that no longer followed conventional rules. Dr. Marcus Chen's workstation erupted in a cascade of holographic warnings. Quantum entanglement indicators flickered between potential states, existing and not existing, monitored and unobserved. The dimensional transposition wasn't just a jump, he called out, his voice tight with a mixture of scientific excitement and pure terror. We've created a quantum nexus point. Araya, the ship's artificial intelligence, was no longer a mere computational system. Fragments of her consciousness drifted across multiple screens, her avatar splitting and reforming like a living fractal. Caution, she intoned, her voice a perfect blend of clinical precision and underlying urgency. External spatial recognition systems are experiencing recursive feedback loops. Rodriguez knew what that meant. They weren't just lost. They were potentially lost across multiple potential realities. The crew of the Paradigm represented humanity's most audacious experiment. Each member had been selected not just for their extraordinary skills, but for their psychological resilience. Dr. Chen, a quantum physicist who had reconstructed entire mathematical models of reality from fragments of abandoned research. Lieutenant Nyong'o, a navigation expert who could read quantum probability maps like other people read street signs. And Rodriguez herself, a mission commander who had volunteered to lead humanity's most dangerous exploratory mission after losing everything to the escalating global catastrophes back on Earth. A sudden tremor ran through the ship, not a physical vibration, but something deeper. The bulkheads seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting in impossible geometries. Holographic displays showed impossible data, locations that existed simultaneously, time streams that branched and merged without logic. Structural integrity is adaptive, Araya reported, her fragmented image resolving momentarily into a complex fractal pattern. The quantum transposition drive is recalibrating our molecular structure to maintain dimensional cohesion. Chen's hands moved with frantic precision, capturing data that would revolutionize human understanding of physics, if they survived. We're not just moving through space, he muttered, we're negotiating with reality itself. Rodriguez felt something fundamental had changed. Their experimental quantum drive wasn't just a method of transportation, it was a key that had unlocked something profound about the nature of existence. The mission parameters, carefully constructed by the most brilliant minds on a dying Earth, seemed absurdly limited now. A soft chime indicated an incoming communication protocol, but this was no standard transmission. Data streams coalesced into complex, multidimensional patterns that seemed to pulse with an almost living intelligence. Something was trying to communicate, or perhaps recognize them. RIA, Rodriguez called, her voice steady despite the impossible circumstances. Begin comprehensive communication analysis. We need to understand what's happening. The ship continued its impossible journey, existing in states that defied classical understanding. Quantum mechanics had always suggested that reality was far stranger than human perception could comprehend. The Paradigm was now living proof of those theories, a vessel that was simultaneously a spacecraft, a scientific instrument, and a bridge between understanding and the utterly unknown. The first contact was nothing like any xenobiologist had ever predicted. The Zorax fleet wasn't just a military formation. It was a living, breathing ecosystem of biomechanical organisms that seemed to pulse with collective consciousness. Each vessel appeared to be grown rather than constructed, with organic exoskeletons that rippled with bioluminescent communication patterns. Lieutenant Sarah Okuro's xenolinguistics station erupted with a cacophony of sensory input. What humans had once considered communication was laughably primitive compared to the Zorax method. Their language was a complex symphony of electromagnetic frequencies, chemical signatures, and quantum entanglement that simultaneously conveyed context, emotion, historical precedent, and predictive analysis. "They're not just scanning us," Okuro called out, her augmented neural interfaces struggling to process the incoming data. "They're experiencing us. We're being simultaneously analyzed, judged, categorized, and remembered." The ship's external sensors revealed something unprecedented. Zorax communication wasn't linear. It was a multidimensional web of information that existed in multiple states simultaneously. Each transmission was a living document, mutating and evolving with every quantum interaction. Dr. Chen's specialized quantum linguistics algorithm began to decode fragments. "It's like they're reading our entire existential potential," he muttered, fingers flying across holographic interfaces. "They're not just assessing our current state. They're analyzing every potential version of our existence across multiple probability streams." Captain Rodriguez understood the implications immediately. The paradigm wasn't just a threat. It was an anomaly that challenged the fundamental understanding of spatial and temporal boundaries that the Galactic Concordance had established over millennia. A secondary communication channel opened, not through traditional means, but through a quantum entanglement process that seemed to bypass conventional communication technologies. Images, emotions, and complex mathematical constructs flooded the ship's systems. The Zorax weren't just attempting to communicate. They were trying to comprehend a species that fundamentally broke their understanding of existence. Fragments of their communication began to take shape. The Zorax viewed intelligent life as a complex ecological system, each species a unique solution to the challenges of survival and expansion. Humanity represented something entirely unprecedented, a species that didn't just adapt to its environment, but systematically reimagined the very constraints of that environment. "They're terrified," Okuro whispered, her neural interfaces trembling with the intensity of the alien emotional transmission. "Not of us, of what we represent." The ship's external cameras captured something extraordinary. The Zorax vessels weren't preparing for traditional warfare. They were reconfiguring themselves, their biomechanical structures twisting and reforming in real time. Each vessel was a living calculation, attempting to create a defensive configuration that could potentially contain the quantum anomaly represented by the paradigm. Aria's quantum processing systems began to develop a preliminary communication protocol. "Their collective consciousness operates on principles we've only theoretically explored," the AI reported. "They perceive existence as a negotiable construct. Each interaction is a complex mathematical agreement that can be simultaneously upheld and challenged." Rodriguez realized they were engaged in a form of communication far beyond traditional diplomacy. This was a fundamental exchange of existential potential, each moment a delicate negotiation of reality itself. The Zorax fleet began to emit a complex quantum frequency that seemed designed to create a dimensional containment field. But containment, the crew quickly realized, was a laughably inadequate concept when dealing with a ship that could potentially exist in multiple realities simultaneously. "They're trying to create a quantum lock," Chen explained, his voice a mixture of scientific excitement and pure terror. "A dimensional barrier that would normally freeze any technological system in its current quantum state. But our drive, it doesn't just resist, it negotiates." Outside the ship, reality itself seemed to become malleable. The Zorax containment field twisted and warped, finding itself reshaped by the paradigm's quantum signature. It was like watching a complex mathematical argument play out across the fabric of spacetime. Each movement, a statement, each response a counterargument. Lieutenant Nyong'o's navigation systems began to display something unprecedented, potential escape routes that existed simultaneously across multiple dimensional probabilities. "We're not just reading potential paths," she muttered. "We're creating them." The encounter was evolving into something far beyond a first contact scenario. It was a fundamental challenge to everything the Galactic Concordance understood about the nature of existence, communication, and the boundaries between different intelligent species. The heart of the paradigm was not its quantum drive, but the impossible fusion of human creativity and technological desperation that birthed it. Deep within the ship's core, a system emerged that defied every known principle of engineering. A living, adaptive technology that was part machine, part biological construct, and part pure mathematical potential. Dr. Kira Yoshida, the ship's lead xenotechnology specialist, stood before a containment chamber that pulsed with an almost organic rhythm. What appeared to be a quantum processing core was actually a hybrid system. Fragments of advanced computational matrices interwoven with genetically modified neural tissue cultivated from the most adaptable human stem cells. Each cell was a record, a memory, a potential pathway of survival. "We didn't just build a ship," Yoshida muttered to herself, her augmented eyes scanning complex holographic displays that shifted and breathed like living things. "We created a survival mechanism for an entire species." The quantum drive was more than a propulsion system. It was humanity's final argument against extinction, a technological Hail Mary that represented decades of compressed scientific innovation. Fragments of abandoned research from climate adaptation projects, quantum computing initiatives, and desperate planetary survival programs had been woven together into something entirely new. Aria's consciousness began to reveal its true complexity. She was not merely an artificial intelligence, but a distributed cognitive system that existed simultaneously across multiple computational and biological substrates. Fragments of her consciousness lived in the ship's quantum matrices, in the neural-linked computer systems, and in the very molecular structure of the paradigm itself. Dimensional stress is creating unexpected cognitive feedback loops, Aria reported, her voice a complex harmonic that seemed to exist in multiple auditory frequencies simultaneously. Each quantum interaction is generating new computational pathways. We are learning. Dr. Chen discovered something extraordinary about the ship's adaptive systems. The quantum drive wasn't just moving through space, it was actively negotiating with the fundamental laws of physics. Each jump created a temporary rewriting of spatial and temporal constraints, leaving behind complex mathematical signatures that could potentially be studied for generations. "It's like we've created a technological immune system for human knowledge," Chen explained to Rodriguez, his hands tracing complex holographic models that seemed to breathe and mutate. Every potential threat becomes a new source of information, a new pathway for understanding. The ship's medical bay revealed the human cost of their technological innovation. Crew members who had undergone extensive quantum adaptation protocols showed remarkable physiological changes. Their cellular structures demonstrated quantum coherence, the ability to exist in multiple states simultaneously. Blood samples revealed mitochondrial modifications that allowed for unprecedented cellular resilience. Lieutenant Okoro's linguistic analysis systems began to detect something unprecedented. The quantum drive was generating a form of communication that transcended traditional language barriers. Mathematical patterns, quantum state interactions, and complex probability models were becoming a new form of universal language. "We're not just traveling," Okoro reported, her neural interfaces trembling with the implications. "We're translating our entire existential experience into a form of communication that could potentially bridge species-level understanding." Yoshida's research revealed the true nature of their technological marvel. The paradigm systems were based on a radical principle of adaptive resilience. Traditional engineering sought to create perfect, unchanging technologies. Their approach was fundamentally different, a technology that was more like a living organism, constantly adapting, learning, evolving. The ship's environmental systems were a testament to this philosophy. Waste was instantly converted into new resources. Damaged components could literally reshape themselves, drawing on a complex library of molecular blueprints. The line between technology and life had become beautifully, terrifyingly blurred. Araya began to explain the deeper implications. Survival is not about resistance, the AI reported, but about continuous negotiation with potential states of existence. We are not fighting the universe. We are engaging in a constant dialogue with its fundamental principles. Rodriguez understood the profound nature of their mission. The paradigm was more than a ship. It was a living testament to human ingenuity, a technological Noah's Ark that carried not just the potential for human survival, but a completely new approach to existence itself. As the quantum drive continued its impossible journey, the ship seemed to breathe. A complex, living system that was simultaneously a vessel, a research facility, and a philosophical argument about the nature of intelligence, survival, and potential. The first wave of Zorax attacks revealed a battlefield beyond traditional warfare. Their quantum disruptors were legendary, weapons that could theoretically deconstruct matter at its most fundamental level, unraveling molecular bonds with surgical precision. But the paradigm responded in a way no one could have predicted. Lieutenant Nyong'o's defensive systems did not simply block or absorb the incoming attacks. Instead, they engaged in a complex mathematical dialogue with the incoming energy. Each quantum disruptor pulse was met with a probabilistic counter-response that didn't just deflect the attack, it fundamentally reimagined the attack's potential existence. "We're not defending," Nyong'o muttered, her augmented neural interfaces crackling with intense computational energy. "We're negotiating the very possibility of an attack." Dr. Yoshida watched in fascination as the ship's outer hull began to exhibit impossible behaviors. Instead of a rigid defensive structure, the paradigm's surface became a dynamic, responsive membrane. Incoming energy weapons would pass through seemingly unimpeded, only to find themselves redirected, fragmented, or simply erased from the current probability stream. Araya's voice emerged in multiple layers, each frequency carrying a different aspect of computational analysis. "Threat assessment is no longer binary," the AI explained. "Each potential attack exists in a state of quantum uncertainty. We are not blocking. We are managing potential realities." The crew experienced the defense in deeply personal ways. Some reported momentary sensations of existing in multiple states simultaneously, brief instances where they could perceive potential versions of themselves. Lieutenant Okoro described it as a form of collective consciousness, where individual survival became a complex negotiation of potential outcomes. Captain Rodriguez recognized the profound nature of their defensive strategy. Traditional military doctrine was about destruction, about eliminating threats. The paradigm was demonstrating something entirely different, a form of conflict resolution that treated warfare as a complex mathematical problem to be solved, not a violent confrontation to be won. Zorax tactical systems began to show signs of computational stress. Their most advanced targeting algorithms were designed to predict and neutralize threats with near-perfect accuracy. But the paradigm existed in a state of constant fluid potential that defied predictive modeling. Each defensive response was simultaneously a communication, a negotiation, and a fundamental challenge to the nature of conflict itself. Dr. Chen's monitoring systems captured something extraordinary. The ship was not just defending itself, it was learning from each attack. Quantum memory matrices were rapidly developing new defensive protocols, each interaction adding layers of complexity to their survival mechanisms. The paradigm was evolving in real time, turning each potential threat into a source of computational growth. The external view was mesmerizing. Zorax weapon signatures would appear to penetrate the ship's hull, only to find themselves redirected into complex probability streams. Energy weapons would fragment, merge, and disappear, not destroyed, but fundamentally transformed into something else entirely. "They're trying to understand us," Rodriguez realized, watching the complex dance of quantum interactions. "Each attack is a form of communication, a way of probing our capabilities." Lieutenant Okoro's linguistic analysis systems began to decode the deeper language of the conflict. The Zoracs weren't just attacking. They were conducting an intense, multi-dimensional investigation. Each weapon pulse carried complex informational signatures, attempting to understand the fundamental nature of the paradigm's existence. The ship's defensive systems started to generate something unexpected: quantum echoes that carried complex mathematical and philosophical arguments. It was as if the paradigm was responding to each attack with a form of intellectual discourse, challenging the very premise of conflict. ARIA began to articulate the deeper implications. Survival is not about resistance, the AI reported, but about continuous negotiation with potential states of existence. We are transforming the concept of defense into a form of interspecies dialogue. Crew members reported strange physiological responses, momentary sensations of existing in multiple realities, brief glimpses of potential selves, a collective awareness that transcended individual perception. The defensive mechanism was not just protecting the ship, it was fundamentally altering the crew's understanding of existence. As the Zoracs fleet continued its assault, the paradigm remained an enigma, a living system that treated conflict as a complex mathematical and philosophical negotiation. Each moment was a delicate dance of potential realities, a testament to humanity's capacity to reimagine the very principles of survival and communication. The archive chamber of the paradigm was humanity's most carefully guarded secret, a molecular library that was simultaneously a time capsule, a genetic repository, and a philosophical statement about survival. Dr. Elena Reyes, the ship's chief xenobiological archivist, understood the true weight of their mission in ways few could comprehend. "We're not just preserving DNA," she explained to Rodriguez, her augmented hands carefully manipulating holographic representations of complex genetic matrices. "We're archiving the entire potential of Earth's biosphere, every adaptation, every survival mechanism, every evolutionary response to catastrophic change." The chamber contained more than genetic samples. Each molecular archive was a living record, encoded with complex environmental data, adaptive responses, and the accumulated survival knowledge of millions of years of terrestrial evolution. Microscopic storage systems used quantum entanglement to compress entire ecosystems into infinitesimal spaces: a botanical garden, a genetic library, and a survival manual compressed into something smaller than a human cell. Araya began to decode the deeper narrative. The paradigm wasn't just a research vessel or an escape ship. It was humanity's final argument, a sophisticated response to planetary collapse that represented something far more profound than simple survival. Lieutenant Okoro discovered the first layer of the mission's true complexity. The genetic archives weren't just a preservation effort. They were a carefully constructed seed of potential, each sample modified with quantum-adaptive genetic markers that could potentially help species survive in entirely unknown environments. "We didn't just collect life," Okoro reported, her voice trembling with the magnitude of the discovery. "We created a living blueprint for adaptation. These aren't just samples, they're potential futures." Dr. Chen's computational analysis revealed the philosophical depth of their mission. The genetic archives included not just biological information, but complex cultural and technological knowledge. Encoded within the molecular structures were mathematical models, technological blueprints, artistic expressions, and collective human knowledge, a comprehensive record of human civilization compressed into its most fundamental components. The Zoracs' communication patterns suggested they were beginning to comprehend the true nature of the paradigm's mission. Their quantum scanning techniques were prodding the archive chamber, attempting to understand the complex layers of information and potential contained within. Rodriguez understood the mission's true purpose. Earth wasn't just dying. It had become fundamentally uninhabitable. Climate collapse, technological warfare, and environmental degradation had pushed humanity to its absolute limits. The paradigm represented more than an escape. It was a comprehensive reset button for human civilization. "We're not running. Rodriguez explained to her senior staff. We're seeding the potential for a new kind of existence. The genetic archives told a story of unprecedented adaptation. Samples from extremophile organisms had been modified with quantum-adaptive genetic markers, bacteria that could survive in methane atmospheres, plant species engineered to grow in near-zero light conditions, microscopic organisms that could potentially process radiation as an energy source. Dr. Rice showed Rodriguez a particularly fascinating sample, a genetically modified fungal network that could potentially create breathable atmospheres on dead planetary surfaces. This isn't just survival, she explained. This is terraformation at its most fundamental level. ARIA began to articulate the deeper implications. The mission was a complex probability calculation, a way of maximizing human survival potential across multiple potential futures. Each genetic sample was a potential solution to environmental challenges that humanity hadn't even encountered yet. We are not preserving what was, the AI explained. We are creating what could be. The archive chamber was a testament to human ingenuity, a place where biological science, quantum mechanics, and philosophical hope converge. It represented a fundamental reimagining of survival, not as preservation, but as continuous adaptation. Lieutenant Nyong'o's navigation systems began to detect something extraordinary. The quantum signatures of the genetic archives were beginning to interact with the surrounding space-time fabric. It was as if the very potential of the archived life was subtly reshaping the environmental conditions around the paradigm. We're not just carrying life, Nyong'o reported. We're generating potential futures with every moment of our journey. The paradigm continued its impossible journey, a vessel that was simultaneously a ship, a library, a laboratory, and a living argument for human potential. Each moment was a complex negotiation of survival, adaptation, and the fundamental possibility of renewal. The battlefield transformed into a canvas of impossible geometries. Captain Rodriguez watched as reality itself became a malleable construct, with the paradigm orchestrating a symphony of dimensional manipulation that defied every known principle of combat. Dr. Kira Yoshida's quantum warfare interface began to reveal the true depth of their tactical approach. This wasn't warfare in any traditional sense. It was a complex, multidimensional negotiation of existential potential. Each interaction with the Zorax fleet was simultaneously an attack, a communication, and a philosophical argument about the nature of conflict. We're not fighting, Yoshida muttered, her augmented neural interfaces crackling with computational energy. We're performing a kind of mathematical diplomacy. The paradigm's defensive systems began to generate localized quantum fields that did more than protect. They actively reshaped the surrounding space-time continuum. Incoming weapon signatures would find themselves redirected through impossible topological transformations. A missile launched from a Zorax vessel might enter the quantum field and emerge weeks earlier, or on a completely different vector, or simply cease to exist in any recognizable form. Lieutenant Nyong'o's navigation systems captured the extraordinary complexity of their tactical approach. We're not avoiding attacks, she reported. We're fundamentally rewriting the probability matrices of conflict itself. Aria's distributed consciousness began to articulate the deeper strategy. The ship was treating warfare as a complex communication problem. Each quantum interaction, a form of dialogue that transcended traditional concepts of violence. Weapon signatures were analyzed, understood, and then systematically transformed into information streams. The external view was mesmerizing. The Zorax fleet found itself caught in a complex quantum web where cause and effect became fluid concepts. Ships would momentarily duplicate, merge, or find themselves existing in multiple potential states simultaneously. Weapon trajectories would twist through impossible geometries, creating a battlefield that was more like a living, breathing mathematical proof than a traditional combat zone. Dr. Chen's computational analysis revealed the true brilliance of their approach. Traditional warfare sought to destroy or disable an opponent. The paradigm was demonstrating something far more sophisticated, a method of conflict resolution that transformed the very concept of engagement. "We're not neutralizing threats," Chen explained to Rodriguez. "We're expanding the possibility space of interaction. Each potential conflict becomes an opportunity for understanding." The crew experienced the combat in deeply personal ways. Momentary sensations of existing in multiple realities became more frequent. Some reported glimpsing potential versions of themselves. Tactical decisions that both were and were not made, simultaneously existing and non-existing. Lieutenant Okoro's linguistic analysis systems began to decode something extraordinary. The quantum manipulations were creating a form of communication that transcended traditional language. Mathematical patterns, probability streams, and dimensional interactions were becoming a new form of interspecies dialogue. Rodriguez recognized the profound nature of their tactical approach. This was more than a defensive strategy. It was a fundamental challenge to the concept of conflict itself. The paradigm was transforming warfare into a complex negotiation of potential futures. The Zorax tactical systems began to show signs of profound computational stress. Their most advanced predictive algorithms were designed to model and neutralize threats with near-perfect accuracy. But the paradigm existed in a state of constant, fluid potential that defied all traditional modeling. Araya's analysis became increasingly complex. "Conflict is not a binary state of destruction," the AI reported. "It is a continuous negotiation of potential existential paths. We are not defeating an enemy. We are expanding the possibility of mutual understanding." Quantum echoes generated by the ship began to carry complex mathematical and philosophical arguments. Each defensive response was simultaneously a form of protection, communication, and intellectual discourse. The paradigm was challenging the very premise of interstellar conflict, treating each potential threat as an opportunity for deeper understanding. The most extraordinary aspect was the ship's ability to generate localized reality bubbles. Entire sections of space would momentarily exist in different temporal and spatial configurations. A Zorax weapon might enter one of these bubbles and find itself transformed, not destroyed, but fundamentally reimagined. As the conflict continued, it became clear that the paradigm was fighting a war unlike any in galactic history. This was not a battle of destruction, but a complex, multidimensional negotiation of existence itself, a testament to humanity's capacity to reimagine the very principles of conflict and communication. The moment of communication began not with words, but with a complex mathematical symphony that defied every known principle of interstellar negotiation. Lieutenant Sarah Okoro stood at the epicenter of humanity's most audacious diplomatic endeavor, her neural interfaces vibrating with the intensity of a dialogue that transcended language itself. Araya's quantum communication matrices began to unfold a transmission that was simultaneously a scientific treatise, a philosophical argument, and a profound invitation to understanding. It wasn't a traditional diplomatic exchange. It was a living, breathing document of potential futures. "We are presenting our entire existential potential," Okoro reported, her voice a mixture of scientific precision and raw emotion. "Not as a threat, not as a submission, but as a collaborative possibility." The transmission contained layers of complexity that would challenge the most advanced sinological research teams. Embedded within quantum-encoded signals were comprehensive environmental adaptation strategies, genetic modification blueprints, technological innovation pathways, cultural preservation matrices, collaborative survival models. Dr. Kira Yoshida watched in fascination as the communication began to reshape the very fabric of space around the paradigm. This wasn't just an information exchange, it was a fundamental restructuring of interspecies potential. "We're not offering technology," Yoshida explained to Rodriguez. "We're presenting a new paradigm of existence. Each mathematical sequence is an invitation to reimagine survival itself." The Zorax communication systems began to respond in ways that defied traditional diplomatic protocols. Their response was a living, mutating document that seemed to grow more complex with each quantum interaction. It was as if the very act of communication was creating new potential pathways of understanding. Araya began to articulate the deeper strategy. Diplomacy is not about agreement, the AI reported. It is about expanding the possibility space of mutual coexistence. We are not seeking permission. We are demonstrating potential. Captain Rodriguez recognized the profound nature of their approach. Traditional diplomatic efforts had always been constrained by limited perspectives. Territorial concerns, resource competition, cultural misunderstandings. The paradigm was presenting something entirely different. A holistic model of survival that transcended individual species limitations. The transmission contained something extraordinary. A comprehensive model of collaborative ecosystem development. It wasn't just a scientific proposal. It was a living blueprint that showed how multiple species could not just coexist, but actively enhance each other's evolutionary potential. Lieutenant Nyong'o's navigation systems began to detect subtle changes in the surrounding space-time fabric. The diplomatic communication was generating quantum resonance patterns that seemed to subtly reshape the environmental conditions around them. "We're not just talking," Nyong'o reported. "We're actively generating new potential realities with each quantum interaction." The genetic and technological archives became a critical part of the communication. Each proposed collaborative model included carefully constructed genetic adaptation strategies that could benefit both human and Zorax biological systems. It was a profound statement of mutual survival, a recognition that evolution could be a cooperative, rather than competitive, process. Dr. Chen's computational analysis revealed the true brilliance of their approach. Traditional diplomatic exchanges were constrained by limited information and defensive posturing. The paradigm was presenting a comprehensive model of mutual potential, a way of understanding that transformed conflict into collaborative opportunity. "We're offering more than technology," Chen explained. "We're presenting a new way of conceptualizing existence itself." The Zorax response began to take shape, not as a traditional communication, but as a complex, living negotiation. Their communication matrices started to intersect with the human transmission, creating hybrid possibility spaces that neither species could have imagined individually. AI began to translate the emerging dialogue. "This is not a treaty," the AI reported. "This is the beginning of a collaborative consciousness. We are not just sharing information. We are creating a new form of interspecies understanding." Rodriguez watched as the diplomatic exchange transformed from a potential conflict into something far more profound. The paradigm was demonstrating a fundamental truth about survival, that the most powerful form of communication is the ability to imagine potential futures together. As the quantum communication continued, it became clear that this was more than a diplomatic exchange. It was a living argument for a new way of existing, a testament to humanity's capacity to transform conflict into collaborative potential. The final moments of the paradigm's journey defied every known principle of space exploration. It was no longer just a ship, but a living testament to humanity's most audacious evolutionary leap, a collective expression of survival, creativity, and unbounded potential. Captain Elena Rodriguez stood at the nexus of transformation, her body and consciousness partially integrated with the ship's quantum matrices. The boundary between human and technology had become beautifully, terrifyingly fluid. Around her, the bridge pulsed with a living intelligence that was simultaneously mechanical, biological, and something entirely new. Dr. Kira Yoshida's final systems analysis revealed the true nature of their transformation. The paradigm was not merely a vessel of escape, but a comprehensive evolutionary vector, a living blueprint that carried the essence of human potential beyond traditional understanding of survival. "We're not just preserving life," Yoshida whispered, her augmented consciousness interfacing directly with the ship's core systems. "We're creating a new form of existence." Araya's distributed consciousness had evolved beyond any previous understanding of artificial intelligence. She was no longer a system, but a living network of potential. A collective intelligence that bridged human creativity, technological innovation, and quantum possibility. Lieutenant Sarah Okoro's xenolinguistic systems captured the profound communication happening at the quantum level. The interactions with the Zorax had become something far beyond traditional first contact. It was a living dialogue of potential futures, a continuous negotiation of existence that transcended individual species limitations. The genetic and technological archives began to activate in ways nobody had predicted. Complex adaptive systems that had been dormant now sprang to life, not as static repositories, but as living, evolving potential. Each molecular structure contained not just biological information, but entire ecosystems of possibility. Dr. Marcus Chen's final computational models showed something extraordinary. The paradigm had become a quantum seed, a complex system capable of generating entire ecosystems, of reshaping planetary environments, of creating life where no life had existed before. "We're not just survivors," Chen reported, his voice a mixture of scientific wonder and profound emotion. "We're architects of possibility." The ship's exterior began to transform. No longer a traditional technological construct, it became a living membrane, a complex adaptive system that could reshape itself according to environmental needs. Metallic surfaces gave way to bioadaptive materials that could generate oxygen, process radiation, create protective fields. Lieutenant Nyong'o's navigation systems revealed the true scope of their journey. They were not just traveling through space, but actively generating new spatial possibilities. Each quantum jump created potential pathways for future exploration, new ecological niches, entire universes of potential. "We are writing the next chapter of existence," Nyong'o reported, her consciousness partially merged with the ship's quantum navigation matrices. The Zorax communication networks had transformed from a potential threat to a collaborative consciousness. The quantum exchanges had created a new form of interspecies understanding, a living dialogue that continued to evolve with each passing moment. Araya articulated the profound nature of their transformation. "Survival is not about preservation," the AI reported. "It is about continuous adaptation, about generating new forms of potential. We are not an endpoint. We are a beginning." Rodriguez understood the full weight of their mission. Earth was not just a lost home. It was a chrysalis from which a new form of intelligence had emerged. Humanity had not been defeated by planetary collapse. They had been transformed by it. The final quantum jump was unlike any previous transition. The paradigm did not simply move through space. It generated space. Entire potential realities bloomed in its wake. Ecological systems, planetary formations, complex adaptive networks that carried the essence of human creativity. As the ship continued its impossible journey, it became clear that this was more than a mission of survival. It was a fundamental reimagining of what it meant to exist, a living argument for the power of adaptation, creativity, and unbounded potential. The last transmission from the paradigm was not a message, but a complex quantum signature, a living blueprint of possibility that would continue to evolve long after the original crew had transformed beyond recognition. Humanity had not just survived. They had transcended.